We are coming to you live from Pocket Hill Studios in Highlands, Harare. It's a very good morning to you, Zimbabwe, and a warm welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Morning Grill. Sizzling hot topics just the way you like it. My name is Tawanda Goodlanger. The Morning Grill is your interactive program that looks at issues of the day, and you can be part of this discussion by getting in touch on our landline number 498-651, 498-651. We also have a WhatsApp platform 0778-784-222, 0778-784-222, like our Facebook page, SFM Morning Grill. Today is the 8th of March, and we celebrate all women and girls across Zimbabwe. SFM wishes its listeners a happy International Women's Day. And today we bring you a befitting topic when women in the changing world of work, Planet 50-50 by 2030. In line with the theme, we will unpack the African Human Development Report published by the UNDP in 2016 with the overall focus on achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women in the continent. Now, to take us through this very important discussion, I have the pleasure of welcoming Professor Hope Cynthia Sadza, who is the Vice Chancellor of the Women's University in Africa. Good morning, ma'am. Thank you so much for coming through.
Good morning, Tawanda, and good morning, everybody in Zimbabwe.
I must say, Happy Women's Day. Is it your day or it's our day?
It is our day, Tawanda. It is everybody's day today.
And of course, it's a very good morning to you and a warm welcome to Dr. Amarakoon Bandara, the United Nations Development Senior Economics Advisor and Chair of the UNSDG Task Force. Good morning to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting us for the program.
Do you feel part of the whole agenda of gender equality, particularly women advancement? Dr. Amarakoon.
Yes, we are very much part of the process as the United Nations. Gender issues are at the forefront of our interventions. And both in terms of policy, technical support and financial support, we provide support to the government across the world.
Getting into it, you're both involved, Professor Sadza and yourself, Dr. Bandara. You're involved in the preparation of the 2016 Africa Human Development Report. Tell us how the report can assist African leaders and policymakers address gender inequalities in the face of other competing national priorities.
Let's start by saying that there is discrimination in terms of women and men. So if you are going to have an sustainable development goal, you must talk about elimination of all forms of discrimination and violence against women. And to do that, we've got to have gender equality and empower all those women. And the critical point here, Tawanda, is how do we do this? Through education. I'm going to zero in on education, because without education, people will not know that the discrimination. People will not understand. Even the women themselves or the girls themselves might not even appreciate that the discrimination, and they need to be empowered. That's how we start the discussion rolling.
Coming to you, Dr. Amarakoon.
There are several objectives of the report. The basic objective is to encourage policy debate on gender issues and what steps could be undertaken by the respective government to ensure gender equality. It also provides a lot of good practices from the region to reduce gender gaps, and it also raises awareness on the cost of gender discrimination. Say, for example, this report estimates that Africa is losing about $105 billion a year due to gender inequality in the labor market alone. And also, I feel that these policy documents could also influence development interventions at all levels and partners, including us, the United Nations, and donors.
Now, you speak of $105 billion as a cost to gender inequality. How do you come up with such a cost?
I myself have done research which was published in the Feminist Economist last year, where the cost is calculated as the difference in the labor market participation as well as the difference in the education. Basically, then it looks at when a person joins the labor market, what kind of skills they can contribute and what is the difference between men and women. That is how it is calculated.
Now, Dr. Sadza, the 2016 Africa Human Development Report identifies legal and regulation reforms, women in leadership, addressing discrimination in education and health, women economic empowerment as pathways for gender equality. How is Zimbabwe doing on the scale of these pathways?
I think we're doing very well, because we start off by saying, have we got a policy? Have we got a legal framework that we can zero in on? We go to our constitution, which says there is an Education Act which says every child is a right to education. That's how we start. And we say the gender policy then in the country says we must ensure equal access to education for boys and girls. If you start from there, you've started from a policy, then you go to the following that policy. Has it been implemented? If it has not been implemented, why? If we don't look at the monitoring and evaluation, we will never get to where we are striving to get in Zimbabwe. Because you can have a beautiful policy, and if you don't evaluate it, it will die. If we've got a beautiful policy and you don't monitor it, then it is going to die. So those are critical issues, Tawanda.
Well, given the fact that you're an educationist yourself, you must have an interest in the implementation in that particular instance. How far have we implemented the policy that you talk about? And also the fact that we even have a constitution that supports this agenda.
For me, because of the Women's University in Africa, we are saying we are implementing that. We are saying let's give equal access to higher education. But we are not being 50-50 here, because we are starting from a 0 to 90%. And we are saying 85% of the students at the Women's University must be women, so that we try to equalize the gap that was standing there. And we are implementing that because we are saying we are not going to sit around and sort of say, well, the policy is there, it will come to pass. That's why we said let's start a women's university that will take care of these women who've missed out in education. They were poor, that's why they did not go to school. They did not accept, or they did not even know that you were poor because you had no education. You were poor because you had no money, and the money was given to the boy child. So it's a whole host of issues that we are looking at. And at the Women's University, we are saying we've got to look right starting from the policy issue.
Dr. Amarakoon, they have taken the stance, forming a women's university, 12 years now, getting into the 13th year in existence. But has this gone across the board when we look at the country Zimbabwe?
Let's look at the overall picture. Zimbabwe is ranked 112 in the world in Gender Equality Index in 2015, that is out of 188 countries. This is far better than its overall human development rank of 155. This also means that Zimbabwe is doing relatively better in terms of promoting gender inequality. And I also feel Zimbabwe is doing well in promoting women's in leadership. So, for example, 47% in the upper house of parliament, top management 16% in firms. But I would say there are a lot more to be done as well. Zimbabwe has done also well in addressing including education. As Professor Sadza says, primary education, we have gender parity. Secondary level, more sectors, it is almost there. But there is a lot more work to be done in relation to achieving gender parity at the tertiary level, as Professor Sadza said. There's another issue that bothers us, that is maternal mortality. Which is high, but recent data indicates that Zimbabwe is progressing well. It might also indicate that the achievements in the years to come could be better. More could also be done, especially in increasing the share of women in wage employment, especially in the non-agricultural sector, which is currently at only 37%.
Now, but significant gaps, Dr. Amarakoon Bandara, have been identified in opportunities between men and women, such as severe impediment to structural, economic, and social transformation in the report. What are the UN and the higher learning institutions doing to bridge these gaps? I'll start with you, Doctor.
Well, I feel there are two issues that will impede the structural transformation, which is health and education for both men and women. Then comes the opportunities available for men and women to engage in income generating activities. UN supports the government in addressing these issues at different levels. First, for example, we support setting up national policies to address economic issues, but also policies that specifically target women. And then we also support the government implementing its national development agenda through our national development framework, SUNDAP. Say, for example, during last year, we have provided US dollars 400 million worth of development assistance to the government. This also includes some gender-specific activities. All over the world, the development interventions are gender-sensitive, meaning we specifically target women to bridge the gap in economic and social opportunities for women. In fact, during the last, say for example, decade or so, it has become an accepted norm in the UN system.
Dr. Professor Sadza.
I'm looking at whose duty is it to provide all these issues. Are we in Zimbabwe going to look at the NGOs and development agencies? I'm saying to Zimbabwe, the private sector must come in here, so that they help the development agencies. The key stakeholders, you and I, Tawanda, must also look at this, so that we don't just look and say, thank you very much, let's say thank you to the development agencies, but let's pick up the stick ourselves and move on. And that way we'll increase the numbers, the people who are educated, and develop our countries economically, socially, and politically.
But isn't that the case that hits Zimbabwe and other third world countries, where we have this heavy reliance on donor agencies in order for them to shape the gender and women mantra forward?
I think that we will say thank you for them to come in with the money, but we should be the leaders in saying where do you want to go. We will say thank you, bring in the money, because you have already seen the picture, you know what is at stake. Some of us do not quite understand what is at stake. So we are saying, let's have their money, but let's also, we've got the private sector, as I've already said, we've got the money. They should also come in there, not just make profits, but also put their profits into the education of the citizenry, so that we develop our countries and with the help of the developing agencies.
This is the Morning Grill. Good morning to you. 21 minutes to 8 is the time. Today is International Women's Day, and of course we are unpacking the Africa Human Development Report, and with me in the studio is the Vice Chancellor of the Women's University in Africa, Professor Cynthia Sadza, and Dr. Amarakoon Bandara, who is from the UNDP. Our line is now open. 498-651 498-651 is is the number to dial. You can also reach us on our WhatsApp platform. That's 0778784222, 0778784222. I'll take our first caller in this discussion. Good morning, you're live on air. Hello, good morning. Good morning, you're live on air. Okay, we seem to have a connection problem there. 498651 is the number to dial. Good morning, this is SFM. 498651 is the number to dial. Now, Dr. Bandara, I will come back to you on the issue that has been raised by Professor Sadza, where he says, fair and fine, let's have the money coming from the UN. But to what extent do you allow countries or member states chart their way forward in their own context in light of economic empowerment and leadership opportunities for women?
Well, I think Professor Sadza hit the nail very well. In the sense, she's right. The governments have the responsibility to take the issues forward. The UN is there, of course, to support through catalytic support and interventions. But it is the responsibility of the respective governments to take the development process forward, reduce inequalities everywhere, including inequalities and discrimination against women. Because as I said before, there is always a cost involved. There are also social implications. And because of that, if a country wants to move forward in the development process, the government has to put in place all the policies, rules, regulations and laws in place.
You will just allow me to interject whilst I take this call. Good morning, Elavana. Hello, good morning. Okay, you can keep on trying. Good morning, Elavana. Hello, good morning. Okay, we seem to be having a connection problem there, but you can keep on trying to call us on 498-651, 498-651. Yes, you were talking about governments taking the lead role in coming up with programs that empower and reduce these particular inequalities.
Yes, as I said, it is the responsibility of the government. There is no restrictions from the UN or any other stakeholder in the government taking the lead in that respect. The UN is there only to support the governments, especially governments who are going through difficulties and having problems in setting the right policies, having technical issues as well as access to capital. But your long-term objective should be to, in fact, get rid of these support and rely on your own resources, because that is when you can define your own future.
At what point should these governments that are struggling be weaned off funding? At what point do you then say as a UN, we are satisfied, you're now able to run programs by yourselves?
Well, there is no such rule. If you look at, say, for example, Zimbabwe, it's a hugely resource-rich country, but the problem you have is managing it well. There are a lot of questions with regard to accessing as well as managing resources, the revenue generation, bringing the resources, the revenues coming out of the natural resources to the treasury. All these issues are problems not only in Zimbabwe but in many African countries. These are the things that we have to address first.
Coming to you, Professor Sadza, obviously, as a Vice Chancellor of a university, there is a lot of interaction that takes place with government institutions. To what extent are they prepared to wean themselves off donor agency funding?
Well, for the time being, I must say we need a little bit of more time. But I go back to my point. We should not look at the donor funding and say we are here, they are here to stay. We've got to take over our own policies. We've got to take on our own issues. These are our issues. This is our education for our children. And if we depend on them, they developed their countries. They developed their own areas because they are looking at their economic development, political development. We're at a different level. So we cannot jump and say we must be like US and we can be like China. We've got to move according to the pace that we can have in Zimbabwe, because if we do that, then we're going to miss the basics, because you got to start from grade 1, not to start from grade 6 and go into form 3. So I think it's a process, as Dr. Bandara says. It's a process. That process must also be speeded up by the level of help that we can get from the, shall I say, the rich countries or the countries that have seen it all before to help Zimbabwe.
But they say that he who pays the piper also calls the tune. To what extent do we have control over our policies or policy formulation process?
I think we can. It's a give and take. We can help each other. If we are saying the policy is going to go this way and they've gone that route, they can sort of say, guess what, we went through that route and we made mistakes. Why do you want to go through the same mistakes? Just jump this thing and do that one. We can learn from each other, but let's be careful not to be controlled, having copied from them. You can copy the good points from them. They can also copy the good points that we have. For instance, our values sometimes are very, very different. And they can also copy our values that are very, very good. And we can also copy the values of economic development faster than we do.
We'll take another call. We'll try and take the first caller. Good morning, you're live on air. Hello, good morning. Okay, we seem to have some gremlins in the studio, Professor Sadza, on International Women's Day. I hope that it's not those that are anti.
It's not coming from the women, I can tell you that.
I'm glad you said it yourself, Professor. But of course, Dr. Bandara, as we continue looking at this critical issue, an overwhelming majority of women are in the informal economy. What is being done to promote women's access to credit, innovative technologies, and even practices?
Well, let me start with how this issue arises. The informality of the economy is a reaction by the general public to the way the economy is being operated, including how they are taxed and how the financial systems behave, so they can maximize their own return in such an environment. In this regard, the UN always provides its advisory, technical and financial support to the government in undertaking policy reforms. That is one of the key objectives of the United Nations. Say, for example, our support to public financial management during the last several years is one of the examples. Another is our support to the implementation of semester throughout. But we also support the government through specific interventions targeting women's, especially in promoting access to capital or access to credit. Say, for example, today the government is pre-launching the Women's Banking Company to specifically target women in the provision of credit. And I'm happy to say that UNDP is a proud partner in this process, in this initiative. We have been with them during the last several years in taking the process forward. We have provided both technical and financial support. And apart from that, we also have very specific livelihood programs where microcredit components are key areas targeting women in accessing credit. This is ongoing.
498651 is the number to dial. 11 minutes to 8 is the time here on the Morning Brew as we celebrate International Women's Day. That should be good news, Dr. Professor Sadza, the issue of the Women's Bank. But looking at the international mantra of the 50-50 scenario, how is this creating a 50-50 environment? The last week, as we were doing a precursor to this particular program on International Women's Day, there were a lot of calls where listeners felt that if you are to open a bank, let it be a gender bank which looks at both men and women and give them equal opportunities. After all, we are calling for the 50-50 agenda by 2030.
Let me start by saying I support the banks that are coming up with women banking. There are 2 banks that I know of right now. This is try to bridge the gap that has been on the pave, to sort of say men have been getting all the money because they had collateral and the women did not get the money because they had not collateral. But now we are saying we do not need all these collateral issues that people are talking about, because we don't have the houses, we don't have the cars, we don't have the buildings. So if you start a bank and you sort of say the collateral is very, very little, that means you are trying to level the playing field. And so the 50-50 might not be apparent right now at the moment, but it's a process where we move slowly to get to a point where we also, when I want money, Tawanda, you sort of say I want collateral, and I'll say I've got collateral, but please give me the opportunity first to get that collateral before I can start to look for this money.
But is it fact or myth that women were disempowered, particularly in accessing credit?
I think it was in the
How so, Professor?
I think it was in the minds of the bankers, because when you appeared at the bank to say I want 50,000, and I was just a teacher getting about $16 a month, they sort of say, how are you going to pay back? Have you got collateral? The first of the thing, I've never even heard of the word collateral itself. So we're starting from an unlevel playing field. So we are moving towards the level playing field. So in another couple of years, yes, let's also have collateral.
Are you saying, Professor, that a man could walk in with a $16 pay slip and ask for 50,000 and get it?
They look at men with a different eye, Tawanda. You'll agree with me. Because I think when my
Convince
mother...
me.
I'll convince you. I think when my mother was a teacher and she was looking for money, she had to push my father, who was a businessman, to go and borrow money. Because the men in the bank looked at the men with a kinder eye than they are doing.
That was pre-independence.
That was pre-independence. Mm-hmm. But hopefully with independence that we've had, the 30, 40 years that we've got, we should move and change with the times.
Dr. Bandara, would it be true to say that women have really been disempowered when we look at issues of accessing credit?
Yes, I would agree with Professor Sadza in many respects. The women's banking company should be only the first step, because we have to address issues that constrain women in accessing credit from the formal financial system. One could be the lack of financial literacy for women, among women, and that could be addressed easily. The second one, as Professor Sadza, is access to assets. The women usually don't own assets, including, say, for example, land. Land is in the name of the man, and that prevents the women in accessing capital or credit from banks where there is a requirement for collateral, as Professor Sadza says. So, in fact, even the inheritance laws and the ownership issues could be addressed in the long run, so that for the women could access capital just like a man.
Now let's talk about violence in the workplace, Professor Sadza. Domestic violence and in general gender-based violence affects women. What has been your role in addressing this issue? This is really critical, and a lot of women have suffered.
I know, Tawanda, people have suffered, bashing in the homes, bashing at school, bashing all over the place, and the woman has been considered the weaker sex. But I think the younger woman growing up in towns are beginning to sort of say, we are not the weaker sex. If you give me chibakera, I will also return with a chibakera. I think things are beginning to change now. They are, acts to militate against people using violence against the weaker, so-called weaker sex. Mm-hmm. I think things are going to change as we begin to respect the woman folk, to sort of say she might be weaker in stature, but she's not weaker in the brains. She's got the brains, and there's no need for you to take advantage of the fact that I can bash and so forth. The laws, violence against women, the laws are there, so we are protected by those acts.
To what extent have we embraced cultural values? Because cultural values venerate the woman. To what extent have they been fused in with the existing laws in order to protect this so-called weaker sex, was the woman?
I think the chiefs have taken a role in terms of pamatari avo. They're also talking about you do not beat a woman because you have differences in the home. In the villages where the values are respected, people are talking against this violence against women. So the word has already started to spread right from the village coming into the towns, and everybody's talking about it. So I think you don't expect wonders overnight. Things are going to change. I've got my belief that in a couple of years' time there will be no violence. Hopefully, violence comes with different other issues that come with its shortage of money and so forth. But because it's everybody's duty to say there should be no violence against women or against anybody for that matter. But
looking at the workplace, should we say the violence is actually existent, or it's just that women have now ventured into a male-dominated environment such that they feel as though there's some form of violation on their part?
I want to throw that to Dr. Bandara.
Dr. Bandara will allow you to respond. But it would have been nice to even hear from the women themselves some of the salient violent tendencies that come from men, if they do exist.
Do you know, I've got a feeling that it's a tendency that is going to see its end very soon. Because like in America, there is a lot of violence. Men against men, women against women, because of the attitudes in that society. And our attitude in our society has not been just violence for violence sake. So it has been, if a woman does something wrong, you slap her just to teach her as if she's a little girl. But it's going to go down. It's going to go down as time progresses, so to say. You don't teach a woman using a stick. You teach a woman talking to a woman about you've done this wrong and you've done this wrong.
Dr. Bandara.
Even the African Human Development Report indicates that Zimbabwe has a high level of sexual violence, 27.5%. So there is some work to be done. And in fact, the UN has teamed up with the government in addressing some of these issues. There are some specific programs to support the government, especially in promoting gender-based violence prevention and the establishment of quality survivor-friendly services, especially targeting sexual violence-related issues. Some of the activities that we have taken, in fact, a lead from the government is setting the policy frameworks for gender-based violence prevention and response, which includes the establishment of the Domestic Violence Act, adoption of gender-based violence strategy, activism against gender-based violence, preparing standards operating procedures. But as mentioned, these things continue. That means action, increased action in this regard is required to reduce gender-based violence.
Dr. Amarakoon Bandara, UNDP Economic Advisor, thank you so much for coming through to this program. I must also extend my heartfelt thanks to Professor Hope Cynthia Sadza, the Vice Chancellor of the Women's University in Africa. As today, Zimbabwe celebrates International Women's Day. And you want to make a quick comment?
Just a quick comment, Tawanda, just to say thank you very much. And this is the decade or the day or the year for women. And in development thinking, we must realize that women are indeed game changers in the improvement of livelihoods in all communities and societies. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And I know you are a game changer in the education sector. And of course, looking at International Women's Day today, SFM will be broadcasting live from the National Art Gallery. We will be talking more about that. But do stay tuned to your favorite station, which celebrates International Women's Day. The time now is 8 o'clock. We cross over to a news desk for the second and final edition of Good Morning Zimbabwe.